3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! So, Scraps, did you make any New Year's resolutions?
Now why in the mortal world would I do that? Those things are a human tradition. Us magic folk are far too superior for such rubbish.
Much like your high level of humility, I see.
Yes, we tend to succeed in everything, or in the highest levels of perfection. Boop.
Good for you.
Speaking about accomplishments, you better get started.
With what?
With making stuff, that's the whole point. You started this you thing, isn't it?
That's YouTube.
Yes, YouTube, they tube. All humans are one big tube. So stop wasting time and get with the making.
It's past midnight.
No better time than the present. Here, I even got you some supplies.
Where did you even
Start
get...
the year by making me something nice. I'm thinking a new hat.
And where do you think you're going?
I'm going to retire for the night. It's late. Well, go on. Kiss her. Make sure it's really pretty.
It's going to be a long year.
Hurry up, the year's not getting any younger.
The first step to this project is making a pattern. I started with a simple duct tape cast for size reference and began building the structure with old plastic bags I had lying around. I wanted to make sure that this flower hat sits back on Scraps' head, so I messed around with the bags, taping them until I found the desired shape. With that out of the way, I used printer paper to lay against the head form and roughly sketch out one of the 5 petals that will make up the flower. Once I had a shape I liked, I cut it out and tested it against the head form, making any adjustments that was needed before finalizing the pattern piece. The fabrics that Scraps provided are a bright pink canvas, soft pink cotton quilt fabric, fuchsia organza that was left over from a flower bouquet, and a pearl pink spider web lace net. For the base of each petal, I cut out one piece of the canvas for the self and one of the light pink cotton for the contrast. For one of the details of the petals, I cut out elongated triangles using the fuchsia organza. I didn't bother making a pattern for this because I didn't want every petal to look exactly the same. Depending on what you're making, sometimes a little more organic approach is best. It turned out that I used approximately 4 to 5 triangles for each petal. The final fabric piece is from the spider web lace. This was used on the edge of the petals to break up the darker pinks. Unfortunately, this fabric was a major pain to cut. It constantly got caught in the tips of my scissors. But in the end, I finally managed to get all the pieces cut out. I added a piece of quilt batting to the pieces to add a little bit of dimension once I started sewing. Adding the triangles and webbing, I didn't bother pinning any of it, considering the fabric seemed to grab onto one another nicely, so I was confident that it wouldn't shift around much. For the thread, I used a pink that matched the canvas and a lighter pink for the bobbin. This will come into play later after the petals are sewn together. I started sewing the pieces by stitching all of the layers around the border. The pink web lace was next. I used a single stitch 1/8 of an inch around the outline of the fabric. Placing the right sides of the light pink cotton and the darker canvas together, I sewed the two together with a 1/2 inch seam. I clipped and trimmed the edges along the rounded parts of the petal and turned the fabrics right side out by the 2-inch opening I made sure to leave when stitching them together. To close this opening, I then folded back the two fabrics and ladder stitched them together. Now, if you remember the 2 thread selections from before, this is why it was important. With the top thread in the dark pink and the bobbin in the light pink, I stitched the fuchsia triangles down. This gave a more dimensional look to each petal. And we're finally on to the embellishments. For the first step, I used pink glass seed beads and some false pearls. I permanently secured one side of the beaded strand to the right side of the petal and up to almost the top, loosely stitching the end with basting stitches. This will help when I start hand sewing the strand to the edge of the petal. Now the slow process of sewing in between each thread to form a tight bond to the fabric. As I progressed, I loosened the basting stitch at the top of the petal to accommodate for the room the thread took up between each bead. I know it doesn't seem like it would make that much of a difference, but if you don't allow for this adjustment, the strand bead will get tighter the further you go and eventually start buckling on itself. And on to more pearls. This time, I'm using a multitude of different sizes of the round pearls and more of the elongated ones. Along the edge of the petals, I switched back and forth between the round and the elongated to create a cluster of embellishment. Once I finished with the cluster, I decided to continue the pearls up the body of the petals. I'm still not sure if I like this decision, but it's done and I don't exactly hate it, so for now they stay. And even more beading. Next is the pink glass beads in a peachy pink vintage sequin I got from my mother-in-law. I sewed the sequins on with the pearl bead in the center, filling in between the pearl clusters to add a little shimmer. I then repeated all of these steps 4 more times. Once the petals were completed, I began to attach them together. I pinned them together at the top of each petal and where it starts to curve out. and sew them together using a catch stitch. With all the petals joined, I turn them right side out. For the turned up look of each petal, I pinched the middle of the outer curve and secured it with a few tack stitches. I then went back and reinforced the outer edge of the petals with a running stitch. With the hat base finally completed, I went on to make a pattern for the green parts of the flower. I used a paper towel and bits of fabric to drape a pattern for the leaves and stem. Once I obtained a general fit, I drew out the look of the leaves. I know it's a visual mess, but it's always a good idea to lessen waste and try and recycle what you can. This is the pattern that I came up with. When you have a structure this complicated, make sure that you use notches or markings on your pattern. Otherwise, it is very easy to get lost when sewing it together. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of sewing these pieces, but with as weird as the pattern is, I'm not even sure it would have made sense. I added a facing pocket to the edges of the leaves and stuffed batting into the pocket to add fullness. Pinning the outer fabric to the batting and lining, I stitched them down the middle of each leaf point. I also cut out random smaller leaves to add layers to the finished look, and attached them using an overcast stitch. Two more little leaves were tacked on to where the stem will lay. The curly stem turned out a bit thick for my liking, so off camera I took out a bit of the stuffing and hand stitched a thinner tube. And finally, pinning the green part to the petals, I tacked on the piece underneath the outer leaves to hide the stitches. And with that, I was done. So, did you like this video? Did you hate it? Please comment below. If you want to see other videos like this, please like and subscribe. I hope to see you again.